Yo, what's up guys, Alpha, and today I'm going to be doing a full in-depth deck breakdown of a deck that I've recently used to get rank 1 with on the arena ladder. Now I recently tanked my rank on the ladder a bit, trying some new ideas out, but I managed to go 22-1 with this deck to reclaim rank 1, so it's been performing so well for me. Now before I get into it, there's going to be an MTG zone link down in the description. If you click on that, it'll have the deck list there that you can just import into Arena if you want to try the deck out for yourself. And I'm also in the process of writing a full text article about this deck that will have more details, a full sideboard guide, how I would change the deck for best of 1, and some tips and tricks for playing the deck as well. So as soon as that's finished and up, I'll link that down in the description as well. So anyway, with that all out the way, this is my Jund Cabaretti Revels combo Goblins deck in Historic. So this is a deck that is largely built around this new card from Alchemy, Cabaretti Revels. So this is one of the sweetest new cards that's been added to Arena recently. I love this card, I think it's really cool. So it's a 3-mana enchantment, and whenever we cast a creature spell, we seek a creature card with lesser mana value and put it onto the battlefield. So this basically just gives all of our creatures Cascade, and it's on the cast as well, which is really important because it means even if the opponent counters the creature that we're playing, we still get the cascaded creature in play. Now it is slightly different from Cascade in that it's Seek, which means that it doesn't shuffle the library, which is important with Conspicuous Snoop. Snoop is a card that allows us to look at and play the top card of our library. So if we have a Snoop in play and Cabaretti Revels, when we cast the creature from our hand, we still get the Cascade, but it doesn't shuffle the deck, so it won't change the top card for Snoop, which is important to know. So anyway, to explain how this deck works, I think it's probably easier to explain the rest of the deck first, and then after I've done that, I'm going to explain how Cabaretti Revels works in the context of the rest of the deck. So, like I said, this is a combo variant of Goblins, and the main combo in this deck is Putrid Goblin and Grumgully. So Putrid Goblin is a 2-mana 2/2 with Persist, which means when it dies, if it had no -1/-1 counters on it, it returns to the battlefield with a -1/-1 counter on it. And Grumgully, 3-mana Goblin, and it says each other non-human creature you control enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. So the interaction between these two cards is that if you have a Grumgully on the battlefield and a Putrid Goblin, if Putrid Goblin dies and it doesn't have a -1/-1 counter on it, it just re-enters the battlefield because since Grumgully gives it a +1/+1 counter, it will just re-enter as a 2/2, which means that whenever it dies, it will just keep coming back over and over and over again. So that means if you have a free sacrifice outlet alongside it, it provides infinite sacrifice fodder. So the easiest way to win with these two cards is with Sling-Gang Lieutenant. So if you have Grumgully, Putrid Goblin, and Sling-Gang Lieutenant, you can just keep sacrificing the Putrid Goblin to Sling-Gang Lieutenant's ability, which is sacrifice the Goblin and you drain the opponent for 1. So if you have these 3 cards out, you can just repeatedly sack Putrid Goblin over and over and over again to Sling-Gang Lieutenant and drain the opponent out for infinite damage, and you gain infinite life as well. Outside of that, we also have Skirk Prospector, which allows us to sacrifice a Goblin to add 1 red mana. So if we have Putrid Goblin and Grumgully, we can use Prospector to sacrifice Putrid Goblin over and over and over again and produce infinite mana, which is nice alongside Pashlik Mons. So if we have Pashlik Mons as well, Pashlik Mons deals 1 damage to any target whenever a Goblin dies. So if we have Prospector with Pashlik Mons and these two, we can just keep sacrificing Putrid Goblin to produce infinite mana, and every time we sacrifice a Putrid Goblin, Pashlik Mons deals 1 damage to the opponent, which is infinite damage. And additionally as well, we have Goblin Matron. So if we have Putrid Goblin and Grumgully with Prospector and we're producing infinite mana, we can pump that mana into the Goblin Matron to search Pashlik Mons, keep producing infinite mana, and then use some of that mana to cast the Pashlik Mons, and then we have infinite damage set up there as well. So we've got some really nice infinite loops with Putrid Goblin and Grumgully, which is really nice because traditionally Goblin decks, they rely on Muxus as a combo, and sometimes they don't get a good hit, and most of the time you need to rely on attacking with your Goblins as well, whereas this just gives you a way to infinitely win from any position, which is really, really nice. The other really nice thing about this is that both of the combo pieces are also really good on their own, which is really important. Typically combo decks are at their best when the combo pieces are good on their own right, when you're not comboing off. And so Putrid Goblin, the fact it has Persist is really nice because we have a lot of sacrifice synergies in the deck. It can be used to sacrifice twice to something like a Prospector or a Sling-Gang Lieutenant, which is really nice. And Grumgully is also just good in its own right as well because it makes all of our Goblins enter with additional +1/+1 counters, which is just great at putting stats onto the battlefield as well. So let's have a look at the other cards in the deck as well. We've got Skirk Prospector, like I said, can be used to produce infinite mana with Putrid Goblin and Grumgully, but even outside of that, producing excess mana is really nice at being able able to ramp into Muxus. If we have a Matron, we can search up our 1 of Muxus, and we can cast our Muxus before turn 6, which is really important. And just producing excess mana is great because we have a lot of mana sinks. Conspicuous Snoop allows us to play off the top of our deck, so being able to produce more mana to cast more cards off the top of the library is really important. Pashlik Mons also has an activated ability where we can sacrifice the Goblin to produce 2 more. And there's also really nice synergy between Prospector and Pashlik Mons, even outside of the combo as well. Because if we have these 2 cards alongside each other, we can sacrifice our Goblins for mana, and every time we sacrifice a Goblin, we deal 1 damage to any target with Pashlik Mons. So the great thing about Pashlik Mons is it can deal damage directly to the opponent, and also to the opponent's creatures. So if we have a wide board of Goblins with Prospector and Pashlik Mons, we can start sacrificing our Goblins, and we can just pick apart the opponent's board of creatures with Pashlik Mons by repeatedly dealing 1 damage to their creatures. Then if we have 4 mana off the Prospector, we can pump that mana into Pashlik Mons' ability, sacrifice the Goblin to create 2 more Goblins, to keep sacrificing Goblins and dealing 1 damage to anywhere. So Prospector plus Pashlik Mons is a really nice combination to be able to either pick apart the opponent's board or just deal a lot of direct damage to the opponent. And then we've also got Putrid Goblin, like I said, part of the combo, and just really useful as a sack outlet since it can be sacrificed to pay for 2 it can be sacrificed twice essentially because of the persist. We've got 4 copies of Conspicuous Snoop, so this allows us to play Goblins off the top of our library, which is so strong. This is such a good card advantage engine, and it's particularly strong in slower and grindier matchups. It also gets the ability of the top Goblin on our library, so this is particularly important with Prospector and Slingang Lieutenant. You know, we can use the Snoop if we have either of these on top of the library, Snoop gains their abilities, which means that it can also be subbed in as a way to combo. You know, if we have Grumgully and Putrid Goblin and Snoop on the battlefield, and we happen to have a Slingang Lieutenant on the top of our library, we can also combo off because Snoop then gains the Slingang Lieutenant ability, which is really nice. We got 4 copies of Munitions Expert, so this is really efficient removal on a stick. It's so good. So 2 mana with flash, and when it enters the battlefield, it deals damage to target creature or planeswalker equal to the number of Goblins you control. So this is really nice because in the early game we can kill 1 toughness creatures. You know, if the opponent plays like a Dragon's Rage Channeler or a Sprite Dragon in the early game, we can flash this in order to kill it on turn 2, which is really nice. And then once we've built up a board of Goblins, we can just flash this in later in the game to kill bigger creatures or planeswalkers, which is huge. Then we've got 4 copies of Goblin Matron. This is really important as a way to tutor up Goblins in the deck. We do have a 1 of Muxus, which is nice if we have access to additional mana as just a way to swarm the board. You know, Muxus counts as kind of like a 1-card combo in and of itself. But like I said, we're a combo deck, so being able to search up whatever piece of the combo we're missing, you know, if we have Putrid Goblin and Grumgully already, we can just use Matron to search up a Slingang Lieutenant to win the game. So Matron is really important in this particular build because we're a combo deck and we need to be able to search up our combo pieces. Pashlik Mons, like I said, very nice with Skirk Prospector and part of a combo as well. Even outside of having Prospector, this is really nice in general because if our Goblins are trading off in combat, we can start dealing 1 damage to creatures and directly to the opponent as well. So it makes combat really difficult just having this in and of itself. Like I said, Grumgully part of the combo and just good at producing extra stats on the board. And then Slingang Lieutenant, when it enters the battlefield, it creates 2 1/1 red Goblin tokens, and then we can sacrifice the Goblin to drain the opponent out for 1. So Slingang Lieutenant is really nice because it is part of the combo, but it also provides us another way to win even when we don't have the combo. A lot of the time with this deck, when we're not comboing off, we can just win by developing a wide board, getting in for chip damage, and then just finishing the opponent off by draining our whole board with Slingang Lieutenant. Especially with Pashlik Mons, you know, if you have Slingang Lieutenant and Pashlik Mons together with a wide board, every Goblin we sacrifice to Slingang Lieutenant essentially deals 2 damage to the opponent because you get to drain the opponent for 1 and deal them direct damage with Pashlik Mons as well. So Slingang Lieutenant and Pashlik Mons can just kill the opponent out of nowhere even when we don't have the combo, and provides a really solid backup plan. And then finally we've got 1 copy of Muxus. So this is here as just a Matron tutor target, and Muxus, you know, it kind of works as a combo on its own because it can completely swarm the board. You can obviously hit the combo off Muxus if you happen to hit Grumgully, Putrid Goblin, and, you know, Prospector or Slingang Lieutenant. And it's just a way to completely swarm the board, go wide so that we can drain the opponent out as well. You really don't need more than 1 copy. Honestly, this deck could be fine without Muxus, but the fact that we're running 4 Matron, Muxus is essentially free as a 1-off to run. And then in situations where you're, you know, if the opponent's running an interactive deck and they've picked apart your board, we can just Matron from Muxus just to completely refuel. If you just have access to the mana to pay for it, you know, maybe you have a Prospector on the board, you can search for Muxus as well to just refuel. So the fact that we get Muxus as a 1-off, but it's not even that important to the strategy of the deck, is so sick. It's just a bit of extra spice to make sure that we can just swarm the board when we're a little bit light on resources. Then back to Cabaretti Revels. So this is such a nice card in this deck. This has actually been quite a hard card to build around. I've been trying it in loads of different shells, but this deck feels like the absolute perfect shell for it overall. It's so good. So we're going to look at all the individual cards and how they interact with the Cabaretti Revels. So first of all, Skirk Prospector is really nice with Revels because if we cast any of our 2-drops, we're guaranteed to hit Prospector, and Prospector is always the card that we want to see. Additionally, we can also play Revels on turn 2, which is really nice. We can obviously play Prospector on turn 1, and then on turn 2 we can sacrifice it to its own ability to cast the Revels. We obviously do lose the Prospector in order to do this, but it's really not much of an issue because all we need to do is then cast any of our 2-drops, and then we're guaranteed to hit the Prospector off the Revels, which is really nice. Putrid Goblin is great with Revels as well because if we cast it, it always cascades into Prospector, and since it has Persist, it basically just pays for itself immediately because we can sacrifice it to the Prospector to produce 2 red mana if we wanted to. Oh, the other really nice thing about Prospector with Revels is that once we do cascade into it, we can then sacrifice our goblins to produce more mana to play more goblins, and all those goblins that we cast will then trigger the Revels again. So we can cascade into Prospector, sack our goblins for more mana, play an additional goblin which will then cascade into other stuff. So Prospector allows us to do these really crazy turns where we can get multiple cascades off the Revels in one go. Additionally, Putrid Goblin is really great to cascade into, especially because we can cast Grumgully on turn 3 and then cascade into Putrid Goblin, and then out of nowhere we have both combo pieces immediately. So Putrid Goblin, really great to cast and to cascade into. Conspicuous Snoop is really great to cast with Revels as well because it guarantees that we hit Prospector, and Prospector with Snoop is really nice because, like I said, we can sacrifice our goblins to produce more mana in order to cast more goblins off the top of our library. And the other great thing with Revels and Snoop is every goblin we cast off the top of our library then also has Cascade as well. So Snoop with Revels essentially gives you 2 goblins for every goblin you cast off the top. So even if you have a completely empty board, if you have Revels on the battlefield and you cast Snoop, you can just refill your board completely in a few turns. It's so powerful. Munitions Expert is also great with Revels because if we cast it, it's guaranteed to cascade into Prospector, and the Prospector will enter the battlefield before the Munitions Expert does. So that means that when we cast the Munitions Expert, we're guaranteed to get an additional goblin on the battlefield, which will mean that Expert deals more damage when it enters the battlefield. And additionally, again, it's another great card to cascade into because it's essentially removal that we can hit. You know, being able to cast a 3 or 4 drop or Muxus and hit Expert of Revels basically can just deal removal and deal with the biggest creature the opponent has out of nowhere, which is huge. Goblin Matron is another card that works great with it because we get to see what we hit off the cascade before Matron enters the battlefield. So if we cast the Matron and we cascade into Putrid Goblin, we can then choose to go get Grumgully, so it helps inform the decision of the search that we get. And additionally, it's great to hit Matron off the Revels as well, obviously because we can cast Lieutenant or Maxis and then hit a Matron and search for whatever we need as well. Pashlik Mon's similarly great on either side of Revels because, you know, any of the goblins that we hit off the cascade with Pashlik Mons is great because then if the opponent kills the goblins, we can deal 1 damage to any target. And additionally, it's another card that's great to hit off the other side. Similarly with Grumgully, like I said, being able to hit Putrid Goblin off Revels with Grumgully is huge because you can basically just hit both pieces of the combo out of nowhere, which is great. And then again, it's another great card to cascade into because it means that if we cast a Sling Gang Lieutenant or Muxus, which are the only 2 cards that we can cascade into Grumgully with, all of the goblins will then enter with additional +1/+1 counters on, which is huge. You know, Sling Gang Lieutenant making all of the goblins we get 2/2s is huge, and obviously Muxus, if we have a Grumgully in play before Muxus enters the battlefield, everything we hit off Muxus is going to get +1/+1 counters as well. And then Sling Gang Lieutenant, you know, with the ability to sack a goblin to drain the opponent for 1, getting multiple goblins onto the battlefield is huge. So the fact that we cascade into any of our goblins just helps with Lieutenant as well, and obviously it's insane with Muxus as well. So as you can see, Revels works so well with the deck. The fact that we always hit Prospector off our 2-drops is huge as well, and Revels just, the hands where you have Revels, the deck just goes into overdrive. It's so powerful and can just enable these insane turns where we can just use Prospector to keep casting goblins over and over and cascade every single time. It's just so strong. So the thing with Revels, or the important thing with Revels to note, is that it's always worth thinking about all the possible cards that you could cascade into, especially when you're slightly behind. So say for example you're losing and you need to combo off this turn, you need to be thinking, okay, I could Grumgully into Putrid Goblin. You know, say you have a Prospector on the battlefield and a Pashlik Mons in hand. You're better off playing Grumgully because there's a chance you could hit Putrid Goblin, and then you have infinite mana. You could infinite mana and then cast Pashlik Mons and win the game. Say, for example, you need removal this turn, and you have like Slingang Lieutenant and a Goblin Matron. In that instance, you're better off casting the 3-drop because then you're more likely to hit the Munitions Expert. So rather than just playing whatever you think the most generically powerful card is, it's always worth thinking about all the possible options you could cascade into, because if you have certain combo pieces, you could potentially hit other parts of the combo, and it's worth always thinking about that. But just in general, Revels is the perfect card in this deck, and it really helps to both hit the combo and just set up a bunch of synergies so you can just go off and get tons of goblins into the battlefield in one turn. And then onto the mana base, I'm running 25 lands, and I feel like that's really important because we have loads of 3-drops. This is a deck where if you miss your 3rd land drop, you basically just lose the game on the spot, so it's really important to have a high land count. In terms of the actual lands themselves, I've got 12 lands that can produce black. Secluded Courtyard is essentially working as additional black land in order to enable Putrid Goblin and Munitions Expert on turn 2, and then obviously Slingang Lieutenant on turn 4 as well. And then we've obviously got the red-green dual lands as well. We can't run Unclaimed Territory, unfortunately, because we do need actual green mana for Cabaretti Revels. And it is a bit annoying with Secluded Courtyard because we are running Hitotsugu Consumes All in the sideboard, which does require actual black mana. But against the food deck, this is basically here just for the food deck, and we do often have time to find our black lands because the food deck doesn't close the game out particularly quickly. So the dual lands have been working out really well. Secluded Courtyard has felt really nice because it can also cast the green for Grumgully as well. And then also a single basic. I feel like the basic is really important right now so you don't get blown out by things like Field of Ruin and Assassin's Trophy. One land that would be really nice to be running that we can't really afford to because we need to be running all of the dual lands is Den of the Bugbear. The reason that this card would be really nice, even, it's just a generically good man land, especially good in the Goblins deck, but Den of the Bugbear also works as an outlet for the infinite mana we get off Prospector, because Den of the Bugbear produces a 1/1 token for each time it's activated. So if you have infinite mana with Skirk Prospector, you can activate Den of the Bugbear multiple times, and for each time it's activated, it will create an additional 1/1 token. So you could, for example, activate Prospector 80 times, activate the Den of the Bugbear 20 times off the 80 mana that we get, and then you'll produce 20 1/1 tokens when you attack. But the problem with this is we don't really have enough room in the mana base. I feel like the basic is super important, and all of the dual lands are really important. If you cut dual lands to fit Den of the Bugbear in, you're not going to be able to hit your black or green mana on time, which is really important. And the other thing is, since we're playing on Arena, I think you're more likely to time out before you actually manage to get this off. Being able to do the Prospector loop 80 times before Arena times you out, you'd have to be clicking insanely fast, so I'm not really sure it's worth it there. But outside of that, the mana base has felt really good to me overall. And the main deck in general has felt really, really tight to me. I've been really impressed with it. So now onto the sideboard. We got 4 copies of Hitotsugu Consumes All. This is basically exclusively here for the food matchup, which can be rough. Especially Mythic Massacre is a card that is very difficult to beat because that will essentially cancel out the combo if you're just doing it with Slingang Lieutenant or just doing it with Pashlik Mons, because for each goblin you sacrifice, every time you sacrifice the Putrid Goblin, they're going to be gaining a life off the Mythic Massacre. So the only way you can beat Mythic Massacre comboing off anyway is to have Pashlik Mons alongside Slingang Lieutenant, so you're dealing 2 each time you sacrifice. But Hitotsugu Consumes All really helps in that matchup at just giving us another way to win the game, as well as dealing with all of their, most of their problematic permanents. It kills all of their 1-drops like Witch's Oven, Cauldron Familiar, Gilded Goose, exiles them all, so unless they have Lurrus in hand immediately, they can't get it back again. And then the Vessel of the All-Consuming has trample, so it's really difficult for them to, they're not going to be able to chump block it, for example. We can just force through lethal an alternative way. So Hitotsugu Consumes All is really important at giving us an edge in the food matchups going into games 2 and 3. We've got a single copy of Goblin Trashmaster, which is really important as a matron target to be able to bring in against both decks that are running artifacts like Affinity, but also against decks that are likely to bring in cards like Grafdigger's Cage against us, because Grafdigger's Cage typically is a good card against goblins because of Muxus, but in this particular deck it's very strong because it stops Putrid Goblin coming back from the graveyard, so it does stop our combos as well as stopping us being able to cast Conspicuous Sleep off the top. Now thankfully most people aren't running Grafdigger's Cage right now. People are still predominantly running Exile Graveyard Graveyard Hate, like Soul Guide Lantern and Unlicensed Hearth, but it's really important to have the option there. And there are also certain decks that are running a lot of artifacts as well, like, you know, against the food decks, this is useful to bring in as well to be able to kill stuff like Witch's Oven, and then it's obviously the best card against Affinity as well. Oh, whoops, I didn't mean to remove that from the sideboard, my bad. Then the next cards that we've got in the sideboard is the Graveyard Hate. So this is the part of the sideboard that I'm not 100% sure on. This is basically just here for the Phoenix matchup, and in general I think the Phoenix matchup is pretty reasonable. The thing we're scared the most about are the really fast starts from Phoenix, and there are two main ways that they can have the fast starts. First of all is with Arclight Phoenix, and second of all is with Symmetry Sage for the most part. So you've either got the fast starts where they can pitch multiple Arclight Phoenixes into the graveyard and bring them back on turn 3, which we usually can't race, especially if we're going second. And also they have very fast starts if they can go turn 1 Symmetry Sage, turn 2 Symmetry Sage into a spell. And so, like I said, those are the two main things that we're worried about. And so the Graveyard Hate is here mainly to deal with the Arclight Phoenix fast starts, because I feel like I'm more concerned about the fast Arclight Phoenix starts than I am about the Symmetry Sage starts, because I think they're more likely to have the fast Arclight Phoenix starts more often. Because the thing is with Symmetry Sage, they need to have it on turn 1, and they generally need to have a follow-up creature as well. They need to have like a second Symmetry Sage or a Sprite Dragon to follow it up. And that will happen sometimes, but I think they're much more likely to have the fast Arclight Phoenix starts because they have 3 turns to sculpt it, if that makes sense. They have 3 turns in order to set the graveyard up, whereas with Symmetry Sage and Sprite Dragon, they need to have them in their opening hand. They need to be playing those cards in the first couple turns of the game. Now, if you're worried about the Symmetry Sage starts, I think it's worth running some additional creature removal in the sideboard, but I feel like the problem with this is, you know, you have to kind of pick a lane here. You could run a split of Graveyard Hate and creature removal, but at that point you're kind of adding additional variance there, because you're more likely at that point to draw Graveyard Hate against Symmetry Sage starts, and you know, you could draw creature removal against the Arclight Phoenix starts. So you're just adding additional variance there when I don't think you really need it. I think you're much better off picking a lane in which you're more concerned about and running with that. And in my opinion, I think I'm more concerned about the fast Arclight Phoenix starts, because like I said, I think they're more likely to be able to sculpt their graveyard and get those fast Phoenixes back on turn 3 more consistently. So that's the reason I'm running Unlicensed Hearth and Soul Guide Lantern. Additionally, I prefer the Graveyard Hate because it also shuts off Dragon's Rage Channeler. So if their opening hand is, you know, Channeler into Channeler and then a bunch of spells, Graveyard Hate really slows those sorts of starts down as well. So the only thing we're really concerned about from the Phoenix side when we're running the Graveyard Hate now is Symmetry Sage or Sprite Dragon, very fast starts like that. So the reason I'm running a split of 1 and 3 is because I think Unlicensed Hearth is just the best Graveyard Hate in the whole format, but it's not great in multiples. You know, the first copy of Unlicensed Hearth is amazing, but after that, you lose value on the second, third, and fourth copies. Whereas Soul Guide Lantern, you can always cycle it away if you do draw multiples, which is really useful. And additionally, the Graveyard Hate, I feel, is also pretty applicable against some other decks as well. You know, Greasefang isn't as popular, but having access to Graveyard Hate really helps to shore up those sorts of matchups as well. But if you're more concerned about Symmetry Sage, or there are other creatures that can be slightly difficult to deal with as well, like Rampaging Ferocidon, doesn't come up as often, but you could potentially swap this out for Graveyard Hate if you're worried about the, you know, just pure creature starts from the Phoenix deck. But like I said, I really don't like running a split, because then you run into the risk of drawing the wrong sideboard hate against different starts. I think you're much better off picking a lane. And then the last card in the sideboard is 4 copies of Chandra Just to Kill. So this is here predominantly for the control matchup. Now there is a little bit of dyssynergy in the deck between Chandra and the black cards that we're running, but that doesn't come up very often. And I think Chandra is really important because it's just a card that is, you know, it gets to the ultimate very quickly. And Farewell and Divine Purge are the main cards that we're worried about from the Goblins side, and having Chandra as a permanent that survives both of them and then hits the ultimate really quickly whilst helping us ramp and get card advantage for most of the cards in the deck is really important. I just realised that I completely forgot to talk about the Achrome War, so just editing this in now. So the Achrome War is pretty much here exclusively for the Auras matchup. You know, the nice thing about this deck is since it's so synergistic, you generally can't afford to sideboard too heavily, which means that you have space in the sideboard to dedicate for more specific matchups. Auras can be difficult because they're so good at racing, and the Achrome War is just the best tool against Auras because you can steal their big creature, force all of their smaller creatures to attack, and you can just block and kill them, and that usually just buys you enough time to set up your wins. So Achrome War is here because it's really good against auras, and there are also some other decks that have big creatures like Sarah's Emissary, for example, where you can bring it in as well. So that's the main reason why the Achroma was there, just to really help against the auras matchup, which can be tough otherwise. So that's the deck. It's been performing so well for me. You know, I've not gone on a win streak like this with this is the only deck that I've gone on a win streak like this with for a very long time. It's so much fun to play as well. So if you've got any questions about the deck at all, drop me a comment below. Next up, I've got 5 matches I was playing with this deck on the arena ladder, so you guys can see the deck in action. So I hope you enjoy. Big up. Okay, sweet. Here we go. Okay, so we're going second here. And yeah, this looks pretty decent. You know, it's a bit annoying we don't have black mana for Sling-Gang Lieutenant, but we have Prospector and Pashtic Mons and Muxus, which is all pretty decent. Okay, turn 1 Sentinel. So if I had to guess, I'd probably say either Humans or Affinity, both of which are pretty reasonable matchups, I think. Especially Humans is quite a good matchup, so I think out of the two we prefer to see Humans here. Okay, so sweet. It does look like it's Humans, since we've seen the green land now. Now, typically, I wouldn't mind trading a Prospector with an Esper Sentinel, but now since we have a Muxus in hand, I think we're very much incentivized to not block here, because assuming our creatures survive here, we can go for a turn 4 Muxus, even if we don't draw our fourth land. So again, you know, in certain situations, we might want to trade a Prospector for a Sentinel, but here, like I said, since we have Muxus in hand, that's our current game plan. A little bit annoying that we still haven't seen a black land for the Sling-Gang Lieutenant or Putrid Goblin, but Muxus is still pretty solid, and it looks like we're going to be able to cast it here as well. The only card we were really concerned about last turn there was Brutal Cathar or Skyclave Apparition. But I mean, even then, we could have still cast Muxus because we have the second Prospector here, So thankfully Pashtic Mons will mean they probably don't want to block with either Sentinels or the 1/1, which is nice. We're definitely not going to block Adeline here, because we want our Goblins around for Muxus, and we would rather our Goblins survive so that we get to keep one of either Prospector or Pashtic Mons around for the Muxus turn. So they don't attack with Adeline, which is really good for us, I think. We can just block one of the 1/1s, and now we can cast Muxus and keep one of the Prospector or Pashtic Mons on board, which is really nice. So we will sack a Prospector, and there is a definitely decision point here whether we want to sack the Prospector or the Pashtic Mons. There is an argument to keeping Prospector around in case we hit Matron or Snoop, but considering all the cards in our hand are black, and I think Pashtic Mons is actually a pretty good card against Humans specifically, and also if we hit a Sling-Gang Lieutenant off the Muxus, Pashtic Mons is a much better card. So I think on balance it's much better to keep the Pashtic Mons there, and then we'll see what we hit here. Okay, so that's a pretty decent hit. Grumgully is great, Matron here is good as well, and Snoop is pretty decent. Now, again, it is quite annoying that we don't have a black land. Typically in this situation when we don't have anything castable in hand, I would go for Snoop, but since we already have a Snoop on the battlefield, my initial thought here is that we probably want to grab a Prospector so that we can cast all the stuff that we hit off the top of the library with Snoop. I'm just trying to consider if there's anything else. If we had access to black mana, then I could potentially, if we have black mana, we could combo off because we've got Putrid Goblin and Sling-Gang Lieutenant in hand, but since we don't have black mana, I think Prospector is the best card just to help us dig off the top of our library until we can hit black mana. So Cabaretti Revels on top is pretty nice, but again, we have the combo ready here. We just need to draw some ways to cast Sling-Gang Lieutenant or Putrid Goblin. Okay, so they attack with Adeline. Even though they have Bodyguard in play, which I'm almost certain they protected the Adeline with, we've already got value off Muxus, so I'm happy forcing them to sack the Bodyguard here. And we'll get a trigger off the Pashtic Mons from Muxus dying, which we can use to kill their other 1/1 token, which is nice. And, Muxus, as just an attacker against Humans isn't that great. We've already got the value off it, so... Oh wow, okay, so we've got Secluded Courtyard off the top of the deck, which is great. That means that we can just win next turn, because now we have Prospector and Pashtic Mons. We don't even need Sling-Gang Lieutenant to win. We can just cast the Secluded Courtyard next turn and Putrid Goblin. And it's important to note in this spot as well, I mean, Scope Prospector doesn't cascade into anything anyway, because we don't have any 0-drop creatures, but the Seek ability off Revels doesn't shuffle the library here, so that means that we're guaranteed to draw the black land next turn, which is huge. So as long as our Pashtic Mons and Prospector and Grumgully all survive here, we can win next turn off Putrid Goblin, just sacrificing it to Prospector infinite amount of times, and then we deal 1 damage each time. So I'm happy to block with the matron, or champ block with the matron here, and then we'll block with the Snoop just because I don't want to risk losing any of the other 3 cards in case they were running like a pump spell or something. And then we can just use the Pashlik Mons trigger to kill the Catilda. Like, it seemed like a bit of a mistake for the opponent to play Catilda pre-combat there because of the Pashlik Mons, but I don't think it'll end up mattering. So we can cast the Secluded Courtyard on black here, and just cast the Putrid Goblin. We'll get a Prospector off the Revels as well, which is additional, you know, it's nice upside, but we don't really need it. And then we can just repeatedly sacrifice the Putrid Goblin to the Prospector. Since we have Grumgully in play, the +1/+1 counter will cancel out the -1/-1 counter from the Persist, so the Putrid Goblin just keeps coming back over and over again. And then every time we sack it to the Prospector, the Pashlik Mons just deals 1 damage to the opponent. And we're generating infinite mana as well, so we could pump that into Pashlik Mons' ability to produce 1/1 tokens as well if we wanted to, but, you know, we've got infinite damage set up here, so either way, we're just winning the game. So we'll see if the opponent makes us play it out here. Okay, nice. So sideboarding, I mean, in general, this is a deck where you can't really afford to sideboard too heavily because it's so synergy based. And honestly, I don't think we have any changes here. Like, since the deck is so synergy based and you don't really want to be sideboarding too heavily, most of the sideboard is for bad matchups. And so a matchup like Humans where we're pretty decent overall, we don't really need to make any changes, I don't think. So we're going second here. And yeah, this looks decent as well. We've got potentially turn 2 Cabaretti Revels, which is always really strong. We've got Muxus, which we can ramp into. We've got Grumgully and Matron, so we can use the Matron to search for Putrid Goblin if we happen to draw a Slingang Lieutenant to win with the combo, which is nice. Okay, so Sentinel into Thalia. So Cabaretti Revels isn't going to be a big player for the first few turns anyway. You know, normally I really like playing Revels on turn 2, but oh wow, okay, Slingang Lieutenant is a sick draw. So now we can, I definitely want to play the Grumgully here. I'd rather ramp into that than anything else because it's just a 3/3. It's going to be very difficult for them to attack past. And then next time we can play Matron to search for Putrid Goblin, and then assuming we draw our 4th land, we can then play, well, sick, which we do. So we can go Matron this turn, search, and Matron enters with an additional +1/+1 counter on it, which is nice as just an extra blocker. We can search for Putrid Goblin, and then next turn we can play Slingang Lieutenant, which again will enter, you know, it'll put 3 2/2s into play, which even if we didn't have the combo is going to be hard for them to attack past. Wow, they miss land drops as well. But yeah, then the following turn we can just play the Putrid Goblin, and then we have the combo set up again, which is really nice. So, play the Slingang Lieutenant here, get a couple 2/2s into play because of the Grumgully. And now we're set up to combo next turn, which is huge. So we'll see what the opponent has. They do hit their land drop. Okay, so they do have the Brutal Cathar. And they exile the Grumgully. So that's a little bit unfortunate. We could sack the Grumgully in response, but we actually have multiple ways to kill the Brutal Cathar. So I think we'll let them take it. And, I was going to say we have the second Grumgully in hand so we can just cast that, but I think I quite like using Munitions Expert here to kill the Brutal Cathar. Now we could have saved the Munitions Expert to play during the opponent's turn, but then the Brutal Cathar would have flipped to Knight. Now we could have potentially won this turn had I put that pathway on black, because we'd have been able to go Munitions Expert and Putrid Goblin. So, that was probably a misplay on my part. If I'd played that pathway on black, we could have won last turn. Hopefully it doesn't end up costing us. Okay, sweet. So we drew the 5th land, so we can just combo off anyway, since we have both Grumgully and Putrid Goblin in hand. But yeah, maybe it was a bit greedy not to get the second black source in play there. Maybe in future I need to remember that, because, you know, there have been some other situations in the past where you need to be able to cast 2 black spells in the same turn. But yeah, we got there. Nice. Okay, so we're going second here. And, I think this has to be a mulligan. You know, sometimes it is right to keep hands with just 3 drops, but with that many lands, I don't think it's worth it. And yeah, again, we've got a pretty land-heavy hand, but generally, you can kind of afford to keep land-light hands with Cabaretti Revels, because it can just tend to run away with the game if it resolves. Okay, so Moon Snow Prototype, so we're against Affinity here, which is interesting. Okay, so 2 Moon Snow Prototypes, so they could have Rebuke here. It kind of looks like they do, but I mean, we don't mind running out of Snoop here, and I don't think against Affinity we can really afford to just do nothing in the first few turns, because, you know, if they do have Rebuke, it's pretty easy for them to play in a way that they can always keep the mana up, so I think there's no point in playing off curve just to try and play around Rebuke, because they can pretty easily keep up the whole time. You know, again, this screams like they've got a Metallic Rebuke, but I don't think... So if we hadn't drawn the Sling Gang Lieutenant, I think there's a potential argument to holding on to it, but I don't think you can really afford to take turns off, because like I said, it's so easy for them to just keep a blue land untapped so that they can keep Metallic Rebuke untapped. So I think it's better to play stuff out earlier, just to force it a little bit. So again, they could have a third Rebuke. I think that's quite unlikely. We could play Lieutenant here, but I think since we've drawn the Grumgully, it's better to get that in play. So then if we do resolve the Lieutenant next turn, we get an extra 3+1/+1 counters into play, which is pretty huge. Okay, they passed back, and they didn't have Rebuke last turn, so I wonder what they could have in hand. I think we'll try the Lieutenant here. They could have the third Rebuke, but... Oh, well, they don't. So we just get to put 6 power into play, which is 6. So we're way ahead on tempo now, which is great. And we have Munitions Expert in case they have a Nestle Cyst or something like that. Thought Monitor is the card we're most worried about. Okay, Portable Holes. So they were just holding on to Portable Holes. That makes sense. Okay, so we'll sack the one they're trying to target just to drain the opponent for 1 here. Okay, they had another one. Sure. So our hand is lined up very well against what they've got. You know, that's another nice advantage of this sort of deck. Since we're running a lot of 3 and 4 drops, Portable Hole really doesn't hurt our deck that much at all. And now we just got the combo here. We can just win with Putrid Goblin and Grumgully, so we can just drain them out. So that was a pretty comprehensive win for us here, but our hand did line up very well against what they had, so... So we just repeatedly sack the Putrid Goblin here to the Sling Gang Lieutenant, and... the +1/+1 counter ability on Grumgully just counters out, sort of cancels out the persist, so Putrid Goblin will keep coming back again. We'll see if the opponent makes us play it out. Hopefully they don't. So we'll just keep sacking the Putrid Goblin. Okay, nice. So this is a matchup where Trashmaster is just insane, so we'll definitely bring that in. I don't think Pashlik Mons is that great here. Because they tend to have quite big creatures off Nettle Cyst and Khan. One really important thing to note is that you should never cut Pashlik Mons entirely. It's really important to keep at least 1 Pashlik Mons in the deck, so that if you have Skirk Prospector producing infinite mana with Goblin Matron, you can then search for Pashlik Mons to win, because if you don't have access to black mana, then you can't win that turn with infinite mana and Matron, whereas simply having 1 copy of Pashlik Mons in your deck allows you to win with infinite mana if you have Matron in your hand. So you should never cut Pashlik Mons entirely, but like I said in this matchup, you know, Pashlik Mons can be nice at killing stuff like Esper Sentinel, but they're, like I said, their Nettle Cysts and Khan Sign of Urza tokens are always really big. Anything equipped with Nettle Cyst is going to be really hard to take out with Pashlik Mons. And stuff like Ingenious Smith also can outscale the damage pretty fast as well. So I think, you know, Pashlik Mons is still reasonable at dealing direct damage to the opponent, but we probably don't need more than the single copy here. And then Hidetsugu Consumes All, you know, is mainly here for the food matchup, but it's also reasonable in this matchup. You know, you can take out Portable Hole, Esper Sentinel. Shadow Spear is another one that can be problematic, because if we're not comboing off, our general backup plan is to try and drain the opponent out with stuff like Sling Gang Lieutenant, and if they can get a big creature with a Shadow Spear, that can put their life total out of reach of sort of our backup game plan there. So Hidetsugu Consumes All I think is also reasonable in this matchup as well. Okay, nice. So I think this is a reasonable keep. It would be really nice if that Rockvale Fall was a Stomping Ground instead, and then we could potentially play Cabaretti Revels on turn 2. As things stand, you know, we could have played the Rockvale Fall first, but it doesn't really make much sense. We'd rather get Skirk Prospector into play on turn 1. Okay, so the Ingenious Smith here, we'll see what they hit. Okay, Esper Sentinel. That's a little bit annoying with Cabaretti Revels in hand, which is a card we would quite like to get into play relatively soon, but not the end of the world. Now, it is a bit annoying that we missed... Well, we haven't got our third land drop yet. Unfortunately, well, the reason that I'm running 25 lands in this deck is because you really need to maximise your chances of hitting your third land on time. If you miss your third land, it usually means you fall too far behind. So hopefully we can hit it. That's one of the main reasons that I think 25 lands is important. Plus the deck has a lot of mana sinks as well. We're not going to select the Prospector in response since we have Trashmaster. You know, if we can resolve Trashmaster, this matchup is so good. Or like, our board state is going to be so much better than theirs. So unfortunately we do miss the land drop. I'm going to flash in the Expert here while they don't have mana up for Metallic Rebuke. Oh wait, okay, that was just... I don't know what happened there. I think I just had like a brain fart or something. For some reason I thought they didn't have... I must have like forgotten Esper Sentinel was an artifact or something. Oh, okay. That was a really bad mistake on my part. So if we're going to flash in the Munitions Expert to kill the Smith or the Esper Sentinel, we should have set a stop and done it during their upkeep. And yeah, now we're getting punished for it. If we'd done it during the upkeep and they'd used Metallic Rebuke, they wouldn't have had the mana to cast Khan here. So that mistake could end up costing us this game. Yeah, for some reason I thought they didn't have mana up for a Rebuke there. So what we should have done is set a stop during the opponent's upkeep and then flashed a Munitions Expert then. And then at least we would have been able to kill one of their creatures, or they would have played Metallic Rebuke and they wouldn't have had the mana to play for Khan. So here I think our only real way of recovering this match now is getting a Cabaretti Revels into play, drawing a land, and then playing Trashmaster. So, you know, we could have played Matron there, but that seems really slow. We could have played Munitions Expert, but it would have only killed the Esper Sentinel, which isn't the most pressing issue. So I think the way we're winning this is getting Revels into play, and then we really need to draw a land here. And if we can draw a land, I think we've got a shot. And they obviously need to not have Metallic Rebuke as well, which they could do, but if we can draw a land and play Trashmaster here, we'll get a Cascade off the Revels, which will put another Goblin into play. And then with 3 Goblins in play and Trashmaster, we have a way to stabilise because we can kill all of their tokens. I'm not going to block here because I think Prospector staying alive as an additional card we can sack to Trashmaster is potentially really important here. Okay, so okay, sweet. So we drew the land, which is the first step. Now we need them to not have Metallic Rebuke, which, you know, they've kept up a blue mana. They could be bluffing, or they could just have nothing else to spend it with. But I mean, we're not beating Metallic Rebuke either way here. So I think we just have to slam Trashmaster. Other options we have, you know, we could play the Slingang Lieutenant and just chump block and then sack to gain life. But that's not a winning line at all. We could use Munitions Expert, but again, that's not a winning line. I think we just have to play Trashmaster here and hope that it resolves. Oh wow, okay, it does resolve, and we hit a Munitions Expert. That's huge. So we can use that to kill. I think the Thought Monitor is the best target to kill here. And now, okay, this is huge. So now we actually have a pretty good shot of winning this game, I think, because we can pretty easily sack our Goblins in order to kill the tokens. We can pretty easily chump block Ingenious Smith as well. And then if we can survive this turn and play Slingang Lieutenant next turn, that will put 3 bodies into play off the Slingang Lieutenant, plus whatever we cascade into off the Revels, which will mean we then have 4 more, well, we can kill 4 more of their artifacts, and basically every single problematic card in their deck is an artifact. So Trashmaster, well, we'll see what happens, but I think Trashmaster might single-handedly win us the game here. Okay, so they do have Shadow Spear, but again, that's not an issue because we can kill the Shadow Spear with the Trashmaster, even if they equip it to the Ingenious Smith, which I think is the correct line here. I think the opponent should probably equip Shadow Spear to Ingenious Smith, because otherwise, if they equip it to one of the tokens or Sentinel, we can just kill the creature. So they try and Glass Casket one of our creatures here, but thankfully, since we have that Prospector underneath the Portable Hole, we can just kind of trade our Munitions Expert for that Scope Prospector. Oh wow, they equip the token. Okay, so that's better for us because we can now kill. We don't have to kill the Shadow Spear. We can just kill the token that the Shadow Spear is equipped to. So they don't attack with the Esper Sentinel, which is probably correct. We can just block the Ingenious Smith with one Prospector, block the token with the other one, and then we can use the Trashmaster just to kill both of their Khan tokens here. And then, since they're tapped out, I can't remember if they played their land for turn here. They might still be able to play a blue land and hold up Rebuke. But if they don't, and we can resolve Slingang Lieutenant, I think we're... Oh, wow, okay. Yeah, we should be good to win here then. We can just play the Lieutenant, see what we cascade into. Okay, Snoop, that's pretty nice. And now we can just basically kill anything they play. All of their most problematic permanents are artifacts. Obviously Ingenious Smith isn't an artifact, but we can just chump block that all day. We can kill the Shadow Spear if they try and equip it to that, so we can use the Trashmaster to kill the Sentinel here, and then attack the Khan with Trashmaster. And then, like I said, I can't really think of anything else that could force lethal through for them now. They've obviously got the Shadow Spear in play already, but we can kill that with the Trashmaster. So, yeah, this game turned around. Oh, okay. Pithing Needle is a bit annoying. So now they're going to presumably name Trashmaster with the Pithing Needle. We definitely kill Shadow Spear in response here. Okay. So that is a potential card that can win the opponent the game. If they have a second Shadow Spear in hand, we just lose here, unfortunately. But they generally don't run very high numbers of it. So we'll see what happens here. But yeah, Pithing Needle is definitely a way the opponent could potentially get back into the game. And they have the Glass Casket for Snoop, which is kind of annoying. So we have to unfortunately sack the Snoop here. Well, we don't have to. We could have kept it around. But Trashmaster is the only way we have of killing artifacts. So we should... we should definitely sack there just to get the extra damage. So we have to chump block here, unfortunately, which is a bit annoying. So we'll sack Singang to its own ability here. And, okay. So, I mean, I think we have to just Munitions Expert here to kill the token on the Barbed Spike. We're going to wait till the opponent's turn, obviously, in case they have Metallic Rebuke. Thankfully, we have both, so they need double Rebuke here to win. And to be fair, even then, the Barbed Spike is only a 2-1, and we're at 3 now because of the Slingang Lieutenant, so even if we can't kill the 2-1 token, we still have a reasonable chance here. So Thought Monitor is a bit annoying. That does allow them to refuel a bit. Okay, Ingenious Smith. We'll see what they hit off that. The great thing about having Rebels in play, like getting Rebels into play was so important earlier because that's going to produce a ton of card advantage for us. You know, we'll get 2 Skulk Prospectors in play off these when we flash them in, which is pretty huge. So we'll flash in the Munitions Expert here in order to kill the 2-1. Wow, okay, they do have Rebuke. That's a bit annoying. So we'll have to rely on the second one here. I mean, even if they have a second Metallic Rebuke here, we still survive. Oh wow, do they actually have it? Wow, they do. Okay, that's pretty annoying. I mean, thankfully, you know, the Slingang Lieutenant makes it so that we're at 3, so we're not completely dead here. We just have to chump block with the Prospector. And now we go down to 1. Okay, so this is... Wow, okay, that was a sick draw. I think we win here then, right? Because we have infinite mana here. Okay, we need to make sure we don't get screwed by the Auto Tapper. So we need to sack the Trashmaster here to have enough mana. We can play the Grum Gully. Oh wow, we hit Putrid Goblin anyway. I mean, we would have won anyway because we would have just cast Putrid Goblin from hand, and then we would have we have infinite mana at that point, so we can just sack Putrid Goblin 3 times to play Matron, and then this is why it's really important to have that single copy of Pashlik Mons in the deck. You should never board out all the copies of Pashlik Mons, because spots like this, had we not hit Putrid Goblin, we would have been tapped out of black mana, so we wouldn't have been able to cast Slingang Lieutenant off Matron. So this single copy of Pashlik Mons is for exactly spots like this, where had we not hit Putrid Goblin off the Revels, we would have needed to search Pashlik Mons, and had we passed the turn back, we would have lost because they have 2 flying attackers as well. So yeah, that was pretty clutch. I mean, even though we did get lucky with the Putrid Goblin top deck, we would have cascaded into Putrid Goblin off the Grum Gully anyway. So yeah, that was a really tight game. Even though I made a really stupid mistake, we still ended up winning, which is pretty sick. So hopefully the opponent doesn't make us play it out, but it is what it is. It's what you sign up to when you play a combo deck like this. I mean, thankfully it's not too bad, you know. It's not as bad as like the Helioke combo where you just have to sit there for ages until you time out. This one doesn't take too long, thankfully. I mean, one card I was considering running in the deck is Den of the Bugbear as a way for infinite mana, and you would have to do this loop like upwards of 80 or 90 times, which probably isn't feasible, but thankfully with Pashlik Mons and Sling Lieutenant, we only have to do this 20 times or whatever the opponent's life total is. And the other nice thing about it is, even if the opponent's at a very high life total, like if you're against an Angels deck or something, even if you time out during your turn, you can carry on doing it during the opponent's upkeep as well, because it's all instant speed. So even if you do time out during your turn, if they're at a very high life total, you'll still probably be able to win during the opponent's turn as well, which is nice. So it doesn't look like they're forcing us to play it out, but that's fair enough. So we'll just keep sacking the Putrid Goblin here, keep producing infinite mana, and then just got to do it one more time. And sweet, we got there. Okay, sweet, so we're going first here. And yeah, we can't keep that, too many lands obviously. But yeah, this looks pretty decent. I think we'll just put the basic mountain back here. But yeah, we got Snoop, we got Matron, Sling Lieutenant. So the opponent's on a Lurus deck. So that's, you know, it could be a number of things. Could be food, could be auras. Let's see what they're on. Okay, so almost certainly going to be auras here, which is a little bit scary. That is a deck where they can race pretty fast. So here, you know, I think Snoop is a reasonable play, but we actually have the combo here, and auras aren't particularly good at interacting with us. So I think I prefer going Putrid Goblin here, because we can go Putrid Goblin, and then we can go Matron next turn, which we can search Grumgully with. And then assuming we hit our 4th land in the next couple of draw steps, we can then also cast Sling Lieutenant and then cast the Grumgully as well. I mean, I guess the order doesn't really matter too much. But yeah, I don't think auras, apart from maybe like Heliod's Punishment, has a good way to stop the combo. So, I mean, thankfully the opponent didn't play like a Spirit Dancer last turn. You know, probably because they've got Glacial Fortresses there. So they've got quite a slow start, which is perfect for us because we'll be able to combo in 2 turns here, and I don't think they're going to be able to race that. So we'll play the Pathway on green here just in case we draw a Cabaretti Revels. I think I like playing Sling Lieutenant out here because it's slightly more mana efficient, and then we can go for Grumgully next turn, and assuming everything survives, we should just be good to win next turn off the combo, which is pretty sick. And they don't really, you know, unless they have Heliod's Punishment this turn, which I don't think they would be very incentivized to play. I think we should win. They, you know, they sometimes run Spell Pierce. The only card that could even come close to stopping us is Mana Tithe, but even then, since we've now got Sling Lieutenant in play, we can pay the 1 for Mana Tithe anyway. So I'm pretty confident that we should just be good to win here. So we can just cast the Grumgully here, and then we can just drain them out for infinite damage by keep sacking the Putrid Goblin. So let's see if they're going to make us play it out. I mean, to be fair, it's not a commonly played combo. It takes some people a little bit to figure it out. Okay, nice. So auras. This is basically the entire reason we've got a Crone War in the sideboard, so we're definitely bringing that in. I'm not sure we really want anything else in this matchup, really. It's very much a race. I'm just trying to think what to cut here. I think I don't mind trimming a Pashlik Mons because other than killing Self the Saviour and Sentinel, they're going to outscale the damage so quickly. And since this matchup is purely a race, Snoop is a little bit slow. You know, it can be useful, but I don't mind trimming one of each. I don't really like trimming Snoop and no Pashlik Mons because since we have a lot of 3 and 4 drops in the sideboard, you don't want your mana curve to be that heavily skewed towards the 3 drop slot. You know, particularly when I'm against Control, for example, and bringing in Chandra. Munitions Expert is a card that isn't amazing in that matchup, but you can't really afford to cut 4 2 drops and replace them with 4 3 drops because then your mana curve is so heavily skewed towards the 3 drops. So yeah, this hand looks pretty decent. We've got a Chrome War, which is potentially the best card in the matchup. We've also got Munitions Expert, which, you know, again, it's kind of their creature tends to outscale Munitions Expert unless you can swarm the board really quickly, but we can use it to kill Selfless Savior here, which is pretty reasonable in and of itself. So yeah, I think we're just interested in killing the Selfless Savior here. We don't really have any other plays, and I think it's important to get a blocker into play because we do want to stem the bleeding. Like I said, this matchup is a pure race, so we definitely want to have chump blockers in case they have, you know, Curious Obsession into All That Glitters or something like that, and then they can start dealing a huge amount. And in general, I think it's quite important to chump block on the ground when you can here, because if you let damage through in the early game and then they put an Arcane Flight on their creature, that is very problematic, and they can pretty easily score lethal out of nowhere if you let damage through in the early game. So okay, so I think I'm definitely going to chump block here for sure, because like I said, you know, we're shutting off a Curious Obsession draw, and if they do draw Arcane Flight, we no longer have ways to block, and it's not too difficult for them to force lethal in the air. You know, we would be down to 15 at that point, and they can kill us in a few turns if we're not careful. So in general, I love playing Revels on turn 3 before anything else, but since we already have 6 lands already, I think we can just search for Muxus here, and then we have Matron on the ground to chump block. You know, the big downside of playing Cabaretti Revels there is that we don't have any way to block here, so they can force through a bunch of damage if we don't. And additionally, we're almost definitely going to be playing a Crowan War on turn 4 as well. So playing Matron there, we can play a Crowan War next turn, and then we can play Revels the following turn anyway without really losing anything. Whereas if we play Revels first, we then have to play Matron on turn 5, which feels like the wrong way to sequence that. Okay, so they do have a second creature now, which is a little bit annoying. You know, a Crowan War is definitely at its best when they only have one, but we'll force them to attack with a second chapter, and then a Crowan War will kill the Storm Chaser Drake hopefully anyway. So we can steal the SRAM here. Then when they're forced to attack the following turn, we can block the Selfless Savior, and then the Crowan War can cleanly kill their Storm Chaser Drake the following turn because they can't use the Savior to protect it. That's my game plan anyway. Okay, so they have a second SRAM, which again isn't too much of an issue because they'll be getting this SRAM back at the end of the Crowan War anyway, so they'll lose one of them to the Legend Rule. Okay, so they play Cartouche, which is fine. See if they attack. Oh, well, they don't attack. I mean, I'm pretty happy to see that. I guess they do. Yeah, that does make SRAM lose the Curious Obsession. So now they're forced to attack. We'll definitely play the Revels here. And I'm very glad we went for Muxus because we are flooding out quite a lot this game. And then, not worth attacking because they obviously kept the Storm Chaser Drake back to block to stop us attacking with the SRAM there. And, well, to make SRAM lose the Curious Obsession. So now they're forced to attack. As long as they don't have a way to kill the SRAM, I quite like just blocking the Selfless Savior, and then a Crowan War is going to... Well, unfortunately it doesn't kill their 1/1 tokens because they have Vigilance, but it will kill their SRAM and the Storm Chaser Drake, which is really nice. So yeah, we'll block the Selfless Savior here for sure. I guess... I'm surprised they didn't sack the Savior to protect one of their creatures. Oh no, okay. So Hushbringer is obviously brutal for us because we were kind of relying on this Muxus to get us there. And now they have a Selfless Savior to protect the Storm Chaser Drake as well, so... Okay, we might be in trouble here then because they get the SRAM back and now all we have is Muxus. I mean, thankfully we have the Revels in place, so we do get a Cascade, but we don't get any of the creatures off Muxus. And Hushbringer is pretty brutal for this deck because it also shuts off the combo as well. Because Hushbringer stops abilities when creatures enter the battlefield and die, so it also shuts off the Persist on Putrid Goblin, which is a huge problem. I mean, thankfully a Crowan War is a clean way to kill it because we can steal one of their other creatures and then force them to attack with Hushbringer unless it has Vigilance from an aura, and then it will kill it off the next mode of the Crowan War. But yeah, them having Hushbringer that turn was really bad because I'm pretty sure, you know, we're fairly likely to get there with Muxus. I mean, thankfully we're not dead here, but I really don't know how we're going to get back into this game. So yeah, that Hushbringer was rough. Yeah, okay. I mean, we also did flood out pretty badly that game as well, so we did get a bit unlucky, but... So, sideboarding, I don't think we're going to really be making any changes here. Yeah, the annoying thing with this deck... Actually, Pashtik Mon's probably not great. I think I'm going to bring the extra Snoop just to help us play off the top. That might help, you know, grind through a little bit more. But yeah, the annoying thing about this deck in particular is I really like the Concealed Courtyard because it helps a lot with the mana base. I much prefer it to something like Dragon Skull Summit, which you would kind of need to run because you need black mana on turn 2 for both Putrid Goblin and Munitions Expert. I think Dragon Skull Summit is a much worse land because it's likely to enter tapped a lot of the time, which is a big problem. But the problem with running Courtyard over Dragon Skull Summit is that you can't really afford to be running black removal in the sideboard. You need to be running red removal because you're not going to have black mana consistently enough early enough for it to be worth it. And that means that outside of the Achrome War, red removal other than maybe Fry isn't very effective against auras, and even then their creatures can outscale Fry pretty quickly as well, so that is one slightly annoying thing about the mana base in this deck. So this hand I think is pretty reasonable. You know, Revels and Achrome War are both really good cards. I mean, Revels is just a generically great card anyway. The Achrome War is probably the best card in the matchup, so definitely going to be keeping this. This is an interesting choice here because we have the combo again. You know, we have Putrid Goblin and Grumgully. We can use Matron to grab Slingang Lieutenant. So whilst I normally do like playing Revels on turn 3, I think getting Grumgully into play here allows us to combo off a turn sooner, but it is tough to know. I think I'm going to go for Grumgully here. And then we can try and set up for the combo again. Now again, we do need our 4th land pretty badly here because we need the 4th land for both Achrome War and Slingang Lieutenant because we're going to search that off the Matron. So missing our 4th land drop here could be an issue. Okay, so they've got a Sram and the Curious Obsession of Storm Chaser Drake, sure. So attack with the Storm Chaser Drake. So yeah, 4th land here would be very, very important if we can hit it. And I think if we do... Oh wow, we don't. That's a bit rough. I mean, I think we're still going to try and just get the combo set up as fast as we can here. I think that's probably the best way, or that's the way we're going to close the game out as fast as possible. And we don't want to give the opponent the opportunity to dig for Hushbringer as well. We just want to close the game out as quickly as possible. Plus, this matchup is just all about racing, so I think, to be fair, even if we'd hit our 4th land there, I think there's still an argument to playing Matron rather than Achrome War. Because Achrome War does slow the opponent down, but it also slows us down from killing with the combo. Now again, we're really going to struggle unless we draw our 4th land here. But we are running 25 lands, so I don't think it's too unlikely that we will hit it fairly soon. Okay, Esper Sentinel, so that kind of discourages us from playing the Achrome War, really. Oh wow, okay, that was clutch. That was such an important draw here. So now I think I'm definitely more incentivized to get Slingang Lieutenant into play here because that also helps us buffer our life total somewhat. If they had a crazy turn where they made Storm Chaser Drake huge, we can still, you know, sack 3 goblins to put us up to 16 before they deal damage and still be able to combo off next turn. So we're just praying that they don't have a Hushbringer here, or they don't have a way to draw into one. Because, I mean, I've not seen the interaction directly, but I'm pretty certain Hushbringer shuts off the Persist trigger on Putrid Goblin, which would just stop us from comboing off. Now, thankfully, we do have a Achrome War, which is a way that we can cleanly kill Hushbringer, but that slows us down by quite a bit. So we've just got to hope the opponent doesn't see Hushbringer here. If they do, we can Achrome War the Storm Chaser Drake, and then we can force them to attack and block the Selfless save like we did last game, and then the Hushbringer will be forced to attack, and then the... Although wait, Hushbringer has 2 toughness and 1 attack, so Achrome War wouldn't even hit it, so I think we just have to hope they don't draw it then. So they try and Portable Hole one of our Goblin tokens. Again, our deck is pretty insulated against Portable Hole because we have so many good 3 and 4 drops. Oh wow, okay, so they don't have Hushbringer by the looks of things. Okay, that's huge. We just get to win here then. Nice, so we just get Putrid Goblin into play here. Yeah, okay, sick. Okay, so we're going second here. And yeah, this hand looks pretty decent. You know, Snoop into Revels into Sling-Gang Lieutenant is a pretty sick curve out. And just generally, Snoop and Revels is sick because assuming the Snoop survives, we can start casting goblins off the top, which is so good with Revels, because then every single goblin we cast off the top is card advantage of the Snoop anyway, and then we also get an additional cascade on top of that, so yeah, Snoop and Revels is so good together. So Watery Grave from the opponent's side could mean a number of things. Have to wait and see what they play. Okay, Thoughtseize. I mean, that doesn't really help. My initial thought is Control, but you know, there are decks like Rogues, it could be as well. But yeah, I think my first guess would be Blue-Black Control, I think, or maybe Esper. Oh well, okay, so they take the Snoop, which isn't a good sign. I presume that means that they have another discard spell for the Revels. Okay. So we'll definitely play the Secluded Courtyard here. They didn't, I mean, they played an untapped Black Source and didn't have another discard spell there. So I assume they probably have a counter spell here for the Revels. Because I think Revels is definitely the more problematic card for them, especially if they're just blue-black, because they don't have... I don't think they're going to be main decking Feed the Swarm. Oh wow, it resolves. Like, I was definitely expecting a counter spell there, you know, either like a Draw or Disruption or a Saw It coming or something, but against Control, I don't think you can really afford to just not play anything for the first few turns. You need to start applying some amount of pressure. And I held on to the Munitions Expert there because I don't think a 1-1 is going to apply enough pressure on its own that it's worth flashing on turn 2. I would rather wait for them to play a Planeswalker or, you know, even a creature like this would be fine to kill. But now that Revels is in play, that's huge. I think even though this doesn't play around Censor, I'm going to play Sling-Gang Lieutenant here because the value of the Cascade is a lot higher since we can hit a 3-drop potentially. Okay, they did have, yeah, so we could have played around that by playing the Matron, but I prefer playing Sling-Gang Lieutenant there because, you know, as you can see from that, the Cascade has higher value because we can hit 3-drops. And additionally, it allows us to play multiple spells next turn. So next turn we can play Matron and also Munitions Expert in the same turn. And we get the Cascade off both for Revels, which is pretty huge. So, even though it got countered there, I think that was probably the better play. And if it hadn't got countered, having a Sling-Gang and a Pashlik Mons in play together is huge and can deal crazy amounts of damage. You know, if we build up a wide board, even if the opponent has a sweeper, we can just sack our whole board to do crazy amounts of damage. So, okay, interesting. So I think I'm going to lead on the Matron here because I would rather, if they have some interaction, I would rather they use it pre-combat and then we can freely attack with Pashlik Mons because we don't have to worry about another Shark Typhoon. If we attack first, we're just giving the opponent a window to just cycle a Shark Typhoon for 3, which can just kill the Pashlik Mons. Okay, so they counter the Matron, which is interesting. And Prospector is not the best hit because we would quite like to have Prospectors still left in the deck because we have Snoop and Munitions Expert, which are both going to tutor it out. We would much rather see a 2-drop there. Now, there is a potential argument to dealing 1 directly to the opponent because we do want to flash a Munitions Expert and they're not going to have a target if we don't kill the Shark, but that feels a little bit greedy because if the opponent plays like a Narset, for example, we would much rather have the Munitions Expert available to kill that. Violent, okay, interesting. So I was planning to play the Munitions Expert. I think we're going to save it because, you know, if we play Munitions Expert now, we're only dealing 3 damage. If we wait until my turn... Oh wow, okay, that's an annoying draw because now we're not going to get the Cascade off one of our 2-drops. We would much rather Prospectors be in the deck. But anyway, I wanted to wait until my turn because now we can play a Prospector and now we can kill the Sviolin off Munitions Expert, which is huge. You know, Sviolin could be an issue because all of our creatures at the moment are pretty small. And 4 toughness isn't easy to kill from our deck, you know, especially with just Pashlik Mons. Okay, so the opponent doesn't do anything this turn. I think since we really do want to start applying pressure, I'm going to sack, just to make the most of our mana, I'm going to sack the Munitions Expert and the Prospector to produce 2 mana and pump that into Pashlik Mon's ability. Now we do lose both the Prospectors and one of our creatures by doing that, but we get to deal an extra bunch of damage, and we already have another Skirk Prospector in hand, so I like that just as getting additional damage in and making the most of our mana. Okay, interesting. So I'm going to play the Putrid Goblin first just to see if they have any responses. The arena's basically telling me they don't have anything here. So I'm also going to play the Prospector here because we can sack stuff off the Prospector in order to deal direct damage to the opponent. And hold on, let me just count up here. Oh wow, Muxus off the top. I mean, I think we just have to go for that now because we know they don't have anything. Arena's just been skipping straight through their turn, so I think we're just going to sack a bunch of stuff here. We can sack... This is another really nice interaction with Putrid Goblin. Even when we're not comboing off, it counts as 2 Skirk Prospector sacrifices, which makes it very easy to cast Muxus. You know, even though we're not running Wily Goblin anymore, we can still potentially cast Muxus on turn 3 if we go Prospector into Putrid Goblin. So here, I think we want to keep the Snoop around. That's the much better card against control. So I think we will just... Although, having said that... I'm not sure actually. Because black removal tends to be just destruction based. You know, they could have Extinction Event, I guess, but most black removal and black sweepers... I don't know. This is a tough decision. I think I'm going to sack the Pashlik Mons here because I would much rather have the Prospector in play to be able to cast more stuff. Oh wow, okay. We hit this thing on turn, so we win here anyway. Actually, I'm not really sure whether that was right. Maybe we should have kept the Snoop in play. Maybe we should have kept the Pashlik Mons in play. I'm not really sure what was right there. So this is definitely a matchup where we want Chandra, and I'm going to cut... You know, Munitions Expert isn't great in this matchup, honestly, but you can't really afford to cut 2 drops and replace them with... You know, if we cut 4 Munitions Expert and bring in 4 Chandra, the curve is so heavily skewed towards the 3-drop slot at that point that it's going to lead to really awkward hands, and just in general, we're not going to have enough stuff to do in the early game. And I think Pashlik Mons, you know, while it was helpful there last game, it's not that great. You know, Pashlik Mons is at its best against creature decks where we can use the 1 damage to pick off creatures. It is still reasonable in this matchup for sure, especially alongside Slingang Lieutenant, because you can drain the opponent out of nowhere, and you definitely want to keep at least 1 copy of Pashlik Mons in the deck, so that if you have infinite mana with Prospector and you've got a Matron in hand, you can just search up the Pashlik Mons to finish the game out. And honestly, Pashlik Mons is a card where, you know, since it's legendary, the value of that first copy is pretty high, because it is just a generically powerful card, but then, you know, any additional copies in a matchup where it's not great can be a liability if you draw it in multiples. So I like cutting a 2-2 split, just so the deck's not so reliant, or just so the deck's not so skewed towards the 3-drop slot, because it's already pretty heavy on 3s before, and making it even more skewed towards 3 will just lead to awkward hands where you just have 3 drops and nothing else. Okay, interesting. So I think we have to mulligan that. This hand looks pretty reasonable, you know. We do need some help off the top of our deck, because Putrid Goblin and Munitions Expert aren't the best cards, but, you know, it's a fairly low to the ground curve, and there are a lot of good top decks that we can get from this start. So Putrid Goblin, if we draw Grumgully, is great. If we can draw Cabaretti Revels or Chandra, that's also really sick because we have Prospector as well. Okay, they play a tap land, which is nice, because that means that... Oh, wow. Okay, sick. That's perfect. So now I was going to say that's really nice because it means that we don't have to worry about Censor or Jari Disruption. And that's particularly important now, because had they played that land untapped, going for Chandra here is very risky, because having it countered, you know, sacrificing the Prospector and then having one of your most powerful spells in the matchup countered for 2 mana is such a big tempo loss and card advantage loss. But since they had to play the tap land there, and we get to resolve a Chandra, that's huge. And now Chandra, you know, the one downside is we do run some black cards in the deck, but the chances of you hitting a card you can hit are very high since the deck is predominantly red cards. And the great thing about Chandra is it hits the ultimate so fast, so... Oh wow, okay. I wasn't expecting to see March from Wretched Sorrow, so that's a clean answer. They do have to pitch Extinction Event though, which is a card that is pretty good against us. I mean, that is kind of telling though. If Extinction Event is the worst black card in their hand, that could mean they've got a very stacked hand. Alternatively, it could mean they've got a hand of predominantly blue cards, so I don't know how important it is to read into that. But yeah, losing Chandra there was actually pretty big because our hand isn't great now. We've only got one black source, so we can't even play both Putrid Goblin and Munitions Expert in the same turn. But like I said, we do have a lot of good top decks. And you know, one of the good things about running Goblins, especially with Muxus in the deck, is even if we do flood out, once we hit 6 lands, you know, Matron into Muxus or just Muxus on its own is just a sick way to come back into the game. So, but anyway, we do draw a land here, which is a little bit annoying. We'd rather see something else, but we can attack Narset down, and we can also finish it off with the Munitions Expert as well, which is nice. I mean, again, we don't really draw cards in this deck, so the passive on Narset doesn't really matter. But if they're running Commit to Memory, killing Narset could be important for that as well. So, I mean, I think we'll flash the Munitions Expert. Like I said, killing Narset in this deck isn't the most important thing, but I think getting more pressure on the board is quite important here. So we'll flash the Munitions Expert, kill the Narset, and then at least we have some form of pressure on the battlefield. So another land isn't great. I mean, the only real upside is that now we have enough lands to cast Muxus if we hit that. Or if we draw Matron, we can go Matron into Muxus. Now again, that's not super reliable because they could very well have Thoughtseize to discard the Muxus if we do draw that. If we cast Muxus for exactly 6 mana and they have another Jwari Disruption, that's awful obviously as well, but I mean, it's not complete downside drawing lands. If you draw past your 6th land, then it's not great. Okay, so they do have Yeheni's Expertise. We do get to at least get Putrid Goblin back as a 1-1 because of the Persist, but we really need to top deck something good here, I think. Okay, so they still have 2 mana open. Wow, okay, I mean, there's the Matron. That's pretty sick. So we can Matron for the Muxus here. And then we've just got to hope they don't have counter spells or Thoughtseize, which is quite a lot to ask, but we're pretty far behind, so I think we'd need to get a bit lucky to get back into this anyway. You know, drawing Matron there is lucky in and of itself, so we've just got to hope they don't have any discard spells or counter spells here. Oh wow, okay, we might get away with it then. If they tap out for the Shark Typhoon, that gives us a window hit. Oh, okay. They have the Thoughtseize. Okay, that's pretty annoying. And I cast the land last turn, you know, there's something to be said for holding on to the land there in case they have, you know, Undercity Plunder or something, but had they not had the Thoughtseize there and they kept open mana, drawing our 7th land can actually be very beneficial because it then allows us to play around Jwari Disruption, which we've already seen. Okay, I mean, drawing more lands isn't great. I think we're still going to play them out though because we want lands in play for stuff like Snoop, for stuff like Matron as well. You know, getting to our 9th land is actually decent. Well, I mean, now we have Muxus in the graveyard, it's not. Had we not already picked Muxus out, getting to 9 lands does mean that we could have gone Matron into Muxus the same turn. Didn't attack there because any spell will just kill the Putrid Goblin. But yeah, I think we're pretty much dead here. The opponent has a 7/7 in play now, which is a 3-turn clock, and I don't think we're really likely to beat a Shark Typhoon. You know, Muxus is like the only single card that could really get us back into that, and now our only copy is gone. Although Snoop could potentially get us back into this if we get lucky off the top. Ah, okay. Another land. I mean, this is the downside of running 25 lands. You do sometimes flood out, but we do have a lot of mana sinks. You know, had there been a Goblin on top there with Snoop, that would have been very useful, so unfortunately ended up losing that one, but we did flood out pretty badly there. So we'll run it back. And I think we're a lot better on the play as well because we can sneak Chandra and Cabaretti Revels underneath counter spells a lot more easily, so going into game 3 on the play is a huge advantage in this matchup. So we're going first here. And yeah, this looks decent. You know, Snoop is definitely one of the better cards in the matchup. So having 2 copies insulates us against Thoughtseize and removal a bit more, which is really nice. And we also have 2 parts of the combo already. You know, if we can hit a Putrid Goblin, we'd have the combo ready to go then at that point. Oh wow, and Chandra as well. Okay, so we're forcing the opponent to have a lot of specific interaction here, because Snoop is going to run away with the game if they don't kill it, but they also need an answer to Chandra here as well. Okay, they don't kill the Snoop, which is interesting. So I think here, since they've left the mana open, it is kind of a disaster if they counter the Chandra. So I think I'm going to attack Snoop here to try and bait them out. If they have removal, they might play it here. And then we can resolve Chandra. If they don't use removal and we get in with the Snoop here, I think I'm pretty incentivized to play the Matron, because we don't really mind as much if that gets countered, because it's essentially a free card off the top of the deck. And if we play the Chandra here, we're also guaranteed to miss our land drop for next turn. We can see that it's a Matron. So at least playing the Matron tries to clear the top of our deck for us to try and hit our next land drop, which is quite important. Okay, there's the Putrid Goblin, but I mean, we're still going to search. You know, like I said, it's much more important to clear the top of the deck to hit our land, because even if we have Putrid Goblin, we'd need our 4th land for the Sling-Gang Lieutenant to combo off anyway. So here, I think I'm just happy to grab another conspicuous Snoop. You know, we're not close enough to Muxus. We don't have a Prospector or anything. I think Muxus is a bit of a liability at this point. We just don't have enough mana to cast it. Whereas Snoop is always going to be good, so having an extra copy is always going to be useful here. So, I mean, we could play... I was going to say we could play Chandra first, plus, and then get Putrid Goblin. But while we have a Snoop in play, I would rather play off the top. You know, had there been another 2 or 1 mana Goblin off the top, I think we would have preferred to play the Putrid Goblin there. So, I mean, now that we saw the land on top, it is possible that the right play could have been Chandra plus to make a mana and then play the Putrid Goblin, but if they counter the Chandra, we just basically waste our turn there, because then we don't have enough mana to cast the Putrid Goblin. So I still think that was probably the right play. Okay, so Extinction Event, which gives us a window to resolve Chandra here, which is huge. We'll definitely play this on green so that we can cast Cabaretti Revels if we hit it. And then we can go Chandra, we can plus here, and we can get the Grumgully into play, which is sick, because then all of our other goblins are going to be big, which this is one of the matchups where that's the most important. You know, this is all about race. Well, not all about racing, but getting more stats on the board is always going to be good against a control deck. And now, yeah, Chandra is going to be difficult for them to beat, I think. The great thing about Chandra is that it gets to the ultimate so fast, and control decks just can't beat the ultimate on Chandra. And obviously, since our deck is all creatures, they have to be dealing with our creatures and Chandra, so if they focus on one, the other one is going to kind of run away with the game. So just gotta hope they don't have another March of Wretched Sorrow or whatever that card's called. I can't remember the name of it. So opponent's in the tank here, but it is quite a difficult position for them, because they also know that we have Snoop as well, which is another card that they kind of have to deal with, or it's going to run away with the game as well. And again, you know, Grumgully is also a card that they're pretty incentivized to kill, or, you know, if we choose to play Sling-Gang Lieutenant, that puts an extra 3 power into play. Wow, so they choose to take out the Grumgully over Chandra. They could have killed Chandra there. Interesting. So I think I'm going to lead on Snoop here just to see what's on the top. Interesting. So I think we'll play the Munitions Expert. You know, I think we're best off just taking advantage of all the free cards while Snoop is on the battlefield, because I imagine they're going to kill, well, Snoop as a priority. And then Cabaretti Revels, if we can resolve that next turn, is another permanent they're going to struggle with. And in particular, Dimir control outside of Feed the Swarm really doesn't have any good ways to deal with enchantments. So if we can resolve a Cabaretti Revels, that is going to be huge. And like I said, you know, we'd then be attacking them on 3 fronts. They'd have to kill our creatures, Chandra, and Cabaretti Revels as well. So I'm pretty happy about this position here, I think. Okay, Thoughtseize us. Again, they don't have great options here. You know, they could take the second Snoop. They could take Grumgully as well. I don't think there's much good reason for them to take a Slingang Lieutenant when we already have the second one. And honestly, this is pretty good for us, you know, since there's not something in particular that's bad in their hand. Them taking 2 damage off Thoughtseize, and they're basically saying, other than Fatal Push, they're almost completely tapped out here. So, okay, interesting. They don't kill the Snoop, which I'm surprised about. So we'll plus Chandra and we'll deal the damage to Narset here for sure. Then I'll cast the Cabaretti Revels, which I'm pretty sure is going to resolve. Even if they have like a Spell Pierce, we can still pay for it. So, and then we know they have the Fatal Push, so we're going to attack Narset with both. We don't want to let them get an additional Narset activation, really. Okay, so they do Fatal Push the Snoop. I'm surprised they didn't. If they were going to do that, I'm surprised they didn't do it during their turn. Although I guess they know we have the additional one in hand, so probably wouldn't have made too much difference overall. But yeah, I'm pretty confident about this spot now because we're 2 turns away from ultimating Chandra. We have Cabaretti Revels in play. We've got 2 Slingang Lieutenants in play, so this is looking pretty good. I mean, Ashiok is a bit concerning, but we have quite a few ways to deal with it, I think. Interesting. So we have quite a lot of options here. We could play the second Cabaretti Revels and Slingang Lieutenant, which will then get us 2 triggers off the Revels. Or we can just go straight for the Slingang Lieutenant here. I'm not sure what the best play is here, really. I think getting the second Cabaretti Revels in play has to be better, right? Because then we can just sack the Munitions Expert here, which isn't really doing much since the opponent has a 2/3 token. Oh, wow. Okay, I think we have enough to just drain the opponent out here then. Now we've hit Putrid Goblin because Slingang Lieutenant and Pashlik Mons alone deals a crazy amount of damage. I mean, maybe I did that too hastily. I didn't actually count it up, but I'm pretty sure this is good enough for lethal. 2, 4, 6, 7, 8. Sorry, I'm just counting this up. Yeah, I think we're good here. I mean, yeah, I definitely should have counted before I started doing it, because if we got them down to 1 and I've just sacked my whole board, that would be a disaster, but I'm pretty certain this is good enough for lethal here. So yeah, this just shows the backup plan of Slingang Lieutenant and Pashlik Mons. You know, you don't need the combo to win, and Cabaretti Revels is so sick at both setting up the combo and setting up your ability to just drain the opponent out with Slingang and Pashlik Mons as well. So we just sack the Pashlik Mons here. Puts them down to 1 now, and then we can just sack the Slingang 10. Yeah, we had exactly lethal. So nice, we got there. Okay, so we're going second here. And yeah, I think this looks reasonable. You know, we do have nothing before turn 3, but we've got we've got a couple turns to draw some earlier plays, and even if we don't, you know, we've got decent 3 drops. We've got Cabaretti Revels to potentially just start running away with the game. Interesting. So against red-white humans, by the looks of things. Esper Sentinel is a little bit annoying considering we have Cabaretti Revels, and we do draw a 2-drop, which is really nice. Actually, wait, we've got the combo here, right? If we can draw our 4th land, we've got Grumgully and Slingang Lieutenant, so... Because I was going to say, you know, Cabaretti Revels is a sick card to play on turn 3, but when the opponent has Esper Sentinel, it is a little bit sketchy. You know, the other great thing about Putrid Goblin, yeah, it pretty incentivizes them not to attack there, because since we get the persist off it, it's really bad. Well, it's a really bad trade for them to attack with Sentinel, and it would free us up to play the Cabaretti Revels as well. So, okay, they do have a Braid for Grumgully, which is a little bit annoying. But again, you know, Putrid Goblin is still holding the fort down on the ground here. The annoying thing is that Kumano faces Kakazan is a bit annoying because it will mean that we won't get persist off the Putrid Goblin because it will exile it. You know, the flip side of Kumano faces Kakazan basically says if any of our creatures are dealt combat damage, or I think if it's dealt damage by creatures, it exiles instead, which stops persist. And unfortunately, it will also stop the triggers off Pashlik Mons, which is a little bit annoying. So that will, you know, that might free them up to attack here, where they weren't able to the past few turns. Which is pretty annoying because since they have, you know, it's going to be a 4 to a Dante Vanguard, I don't think we can really just afford to let this through. You know, we don't have Grumgully to combo off anymore, so I think we have to start trading stuff off here. I think we want to kill the Etching of Kumano because we don't want them to continually exile all of our stuff, and we want to take out the Esper Sentinels so that we could potentially play Cabaretti Revels as well. Now, we would have liked to trade the Thalia's Lieutenant there because I assume they're running quite a lot of humans, which means that the Lieutenant is obviously going to start outscaling, but I feel like getting the other two off the board is really important. So we could play Cabaretti Revels there, but I think getting Stinglang Lieutenant into play just to soak up the damage is potentially better. I mean, maybe I should have played a little bit slower there. I'm not actually sure that was the best play because from 11, I mean, actually hold on. If we hadn't, so if we'd taken the turn off to play Revels there, we would be at 11 and we would be facing down 9 damage. So we'd be down to 2, but we would then also get the Cascade off the Revels into Lieutenant. So we'd have got Lieutenant and another creature, and then we would have got the Cascade off Pashlik Mons when we played that as well. So yeah, maybe that was potentially a misplay now because Revels is really good at getting you back from behind. If you can sneak a Revels in play and then start playing creatures, you tend to run away with the game. So yeah, I don't know. I think I might have made a mistake there. I think I should have played the Revels and then gone for Stinggang this turn. Potentially hit. Well, we would have hit another Goblin that we could sack to Stinggang Lieutenant. Whereas now we're kind of treading water a little bit. I mean, we do have Muxus in hand, so if we can hit lands. Oh wow, another Lieutenant. Yeah, I think we probably punted this game by not playing the Revels that turn. Because now we're essentially playing to survive rather than playing to win, and having Cabaretti Revels in play could have potentially won us this game. I mean, if they had Thalia's Lieutenant, well, we would have, we'd still been able to block with 3 Goblins because we would have got an extra Goblin off the Revels. So I think our plan now is to just hope that we draw 2 lands to play Muxus, but even then the opponent has a pretty big board, so this is going to be tough to come back from, I think. And yeah, thinking about it, I'm pretty sure that was a misplay and we should have just played the Cabaretti Revels on turn 3 there, because we wouldn't have had to shock our land in then either. Okay. Yeah, I really don't know how we get back in, because we're just playing to survive here, which is, you know, I don't think there's any realistic way that we can win, especially now that we've missed a land drop. So yeah, I mean we're definitely by no means guaranteed to be winning if we play the Cabaretti Revels here. They still, you know, that Thalia's Lieutenant last turn puts a ton of pressure on us, but we would have at least had a chance. And there are a lot of good hits, you know. Had we hit like a munitions expert to kill one of their creatures off the Revels, that would have been sick. Although we would have only been able to kill a 1/1 if we hit it the first time, but yeah, that was definitely a misplay and likely going to lose this game because of that. So, I mean, we have to block the Dante Vanguard as well, yeah. So we just lose her, unfortunately. I mean, again, we still possibly could have lost even with the Cabaretti Revels, because they did have a pretty explosive few turns. That second Thalia's Lieutenant was problematic for sure. So yeah, I don't know. if the Cabaretti Revels would have won us this game, but it would have been a lot closer because getting that Sling Lieutenant in play, we're always going to be on the back foot. We're basically just playing to soak up damage at that point rather than actively trying to get back into the game, if that makes sense. And I can't think of anything we could draw here that could get us out of this. Like I said, oh, and they had Spellbinder as well. Yeah, okay. I'm going to try and concede before they see my hand, just to try and conceal some information. But yeah, potentially punted that game. But again, they did have quite a strong curve out there after they got the Adeline into play, so it might not have made a difference. We still might have ended up losing. So yeah, no swaps in this matchup. Like I said, this deck is very synergistic, so you don't really want to be sideboarding too heavily in any matchup, which means that you kind of want to dedicate your sideboard for bad matchups, and most of the creature matchups outside of Phoenix and Food are pretty good, in all honesty. Even the aggro decks are pretty good for us because we have a lot of roadblocks. We have a lot of goblins that we can play in the early game. We have Munitions Expert and Sling Gang Lieutenant, which can help take apart the opponent's board and just stabilize us as well. So creature decks for the most part are pretty good matchups. You know, humans in particular, like last game, they can have some very fast starts, but typically humans is an aggro deck that is more punishing towards decks playing non-creature spells because of Esper Sentinel, Thalia, Range Captain of Eos, stuff like that. So considering the only non-creature card in our whole deck is the Cabaretti Revels, I think a lot of their taxing stuff doesn't really affect us at all, and we have quite a few creatures that can work as pretty effective roadblocks against them. So I think we can afford to keep this. If we didn't have the Secluded Courtyard, this hand would be a lot more difficult because, you know, had that been like a red-green land, it would have been very difficult because we have to play this pathway either on red to play the Snoops or on black to play the Putrid Goblin and Sling Gang Lieutenant. Okay, so tap land from the opponent is something we love to see. I think we're generally just going to win the long game against humans, so the slower they start, the better for us. So I'm definitely going to set a stop during the upkeep here, because if the opponent plays a creature, I want to be able to flash in the Munitions Expert before we draw the card for turn, so that we can essentially make more use of the Snoop. Okay, so Declaration in Stone, so we don't get to make use of the Munitions Expert anymore, but I think that's fine. And the Clue token can actually help us dig out of Flood if we do end up flooding out, so thankfully we have the second Snoop to follow it up. And again, you know, it's going to be very difficult for them to beat Snoop because they don't have that many great ways to grind card advantage, and if we have a Snoop in play, it's just going to run away with the game. Okay, so they do have the second removal spell for it, which is a bit annoying. We could have sacked the Snoop to try and draw off the first clue, but I think having the two clues in play and playing slightly slow when the opponent doesn't have anything in play is probably a better idea. We can get a Sling Gang Lieutenant in here, which is pretty decent. And then we can attack, and you know the opponent is very behind on tempo now, so unless they're boarding in a sweeper or something, we're at a good advantage. And if we don't draw anything great, like if we draw another land for example, they've given us two clues that can help us hopefully dig out of it a little bit. So we'll see what the opponent has here. Okay, got Crossroads, which they untap. Interesting. Wow, Basri's Lieutenant. Okay, that's a card I've not seen in a long time. I mean, thankfully we can just kill that with the Munitions Expert. Oh wow, wait, we can just win here. That was a good top deck. So now we can sacrifice one of the goblins to play Grum Gully. And then we can just play the Putrid Goblin, and now we can just drain the opponent out with the Sling Gang Lieutenant Putrid Goblin. Yeah, opponent's playing an interesting deck. I think I've faced them before fairly recently, and it's sort of like, from what I can remember, it's red-white humans with interaction, and I think I remember them playing stuff like Containment Priest as well, which is a card that we need to be aware of for sure. So again, going to be running it back here. I don't think there's anything in the sideboard that we really want. Like I said, you could potentially run creature removal instead of Graveyard Hate in the sideboard, but I honestly don't think you really need it against most of the creature decks. The main reason you would want that is for fast creature starts from the Phoenix deck. Okay, so slow start from the opponent again is great to see here. And, you know, Gramgully Slingang Lieutenant is great because if we draw Putrid Goblin or Goblin Matron to dig for Putrid Goblin, we then have the combo set up, which is sweet. Okay, interesting. So opponent shocks then there. So that could very well mean they've got a Braid, but I don't, you know, it's not worth not committing to the board just on the fear of them having a removal spell. Oh wow, they have Mana Tide, okay. Interesting. Okay, Spellbinder. So it's interesting what they take here. I mean, the obvious take would be Munitions Expert so that we can't kill the Spellbinder for another turn, but there's definitely something to be said of taking Slingang Lieutenant here, because putting that to a 6 mana card effectively means it's uncastable. You know, in a way, I think I kind of prefer them taking Munitions Expert here because they're just slowing us down rather than actively taking a card out of our hand. Cabaretti Revels was a sick draw there. I'm sure they would have taken that if they'd seen it off the Spellbinder, because that is going to be a very difficult card for them to beat. And I don't think, you know, they've probably got Skyclave Apparition, but outside of that I don't think they've got an effective way to kill it. And this is the sort of matchup where Revels is just going to completely run away with the game if they don't have an apparition in the next couple turns anyway. Okay, so Adeline, that is a little bit scary. But since we have a Slingang Lieutenant here, and we can effectively block on the ground with it, and we don't really have to worry about the Spellbinder that much, considering we have Munitions Expert that we can play next turn anyway. Wow, so hitting Pashlik Mons is sick. Lieutenant and Pashlik Mons together is very difficult for a deck like Humans to beat because they have run so many creatures with 1 toughness. You know, now we can just kill this Spellbinder straight away, which is sick. We don't even have to use the Expert to kill it anymore. So I assume they still attack here, and if they do, we can just chump block, sack one of the tokens that we're chump blocking with to the Lieutenant, and then use the Pashlik Mons trigger to kill the Spellbinder, which is sick. So yeah, this is a pretty sick spot for us. Getting Revels in play was huge. You know, that was a pretty sick time to top deck it, because I'm pretty sure they would have hit that with the Spellbinder had it been in our hand already. So opponent's in the tank here, but this is quite a difficult position for them, I think. Wow, they attack with everything. Interesting. So I mean, we're definitely going to be chump blocking the Adeline. You know, 12 isn't too much life, especially when they have a Spellbinder in play. So definitely going to be blocking the Adeline. I'm not sure we really want to be blocking with anything else other than, you know, we've got a free block with the Pashlik Mons here, and I very much doubt they're running any like combat tricks that will kill the Pashlik Mons here, so I think I'm happy to block like this. And we can sack the token that's chump blocking in order to kill the Spellbinder here. And then we can potentially use the Munitions Expert to take out Adeline next turn if we wanted to. Okay, sound. See if they do anything else. It looks like they're stuck on land drops. I can't remember if they missed their last land drop or if it was this turn, but that is obviously going to be a big benefit for us, especially since we have Revels in play, which is essentially like not even doubling up the mana, but just for every creature we play, we just get so much extra bonus. Okay, interesting. So the opponent passes, which makes me think they might have Containment Priest here, which Containment Priest does shut off the Cascade of Cabaretti Revels. So I'm going to play Prospector first here before the Grumgully, because I want to be able to kill the... If they have Containment Priest, I want to be able to kill it with the Munitions Expert. because we don't really have an effective way to kill it otherwise. So here, okay, well, okay, they do have the Containment Priest, so I'm very glad I played like that. So now we can sack the token, the Prospector, and I'm not sure what the third sacrifice should be here. Maybe the Slinging Lieutenant? I think Pashlik Mons is... Oh, whoops, hold on, I need to sack the other goblin first. Although, I don't know. I feel like Slinging Lieutenant is more valuable here because we're pretty likely to be able to hit Putrid Goblin off one of these Grumgully Cascades, and if we hit Putrid Goblin, Slinging Lieutenant just wins us the game here. Okay, so we lose the Prospector to the Cascade of Munitions Expert, but that's fine. Actually, thinking about it, I probably should have killed the 1/1 token and dealt 1 direct damage with those Pashlik Mons triggers, and then killed the Containment Priest with Munitions Expert, but that's only 1 damage difference. I'm hoping it doesn't make a difference. So unfortunately we hit Prospector instead. We could still play Grumgully next turn to try and hit a Putrid Goblin, but that might be a bit greedy considering the Legend rule. I mean, either way, I think it was probably the correct play to keep Slinging Lieutenant over the Pashlik Mons there because, you know, we have a reasonable odds of hitting Putrid Goblin off Grumgully. If they kill one of the Grumgullys, we can just play the second and try and hit Putrid Goblin anyway. Okay, interesting. Portable Hole. So since we don't have any ways to kill artifacts in the deck, we're just going to sack the Prospector in response here. Now again, I'm debating whether it's worth playing the second Grumgully out here just for a chance to hit the Putrid Goblin. Because I mean, even if we don't hit Putrid Goblin, we could hit Munitions Expert, which can kill Adeline. We can hit Conspicuous Snoop, which is sick because it allows us to play off the top. The only card that we don't really want to hit is Prospector, which we've already... Oh, wow, okay. I was going to say we've already seen Prospectors come out of the deck, so that's less likely anyway. But now we hit the Mage and we can just tutor up the Putrid Goblin anyway, so... Wow, and we hit Munitions Expert, so yeah, that was a sick hit. I mean, they could still have Containment... Well, I mean, they would have played Containment Priest by now if they had it, but... Either way, we can just search for the Putrid Goblin now, and then we can just drain the opponent out here. And we get another Revels trigger here, which is nice. I think we've still got some Prospectors left in the deck. Oh wow, okay, they have the Braid for Grumgully, sure, sure. I mean, again, we've got the second one in hand, so it doesn't matter. Yeah, okay, sweet.